Hello. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see you all again. I'm delighted to see so many people joining the webinar today and a lot of faces we have seen in the previous webinar as well. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. This is Manvinder from Senra. And today we are going to talk about, as we say it, the all exciting and inspiring technology, a technology that has disrupted the entire IoT universe into so many profound ways, that has become a one-stop solution for a large fraction of the problem of the mankind, the LoRaWAN. So the agenda for today is to deep dive into the concepts of LoRaWAN and understand its advanced features, starting from how handshaking happens in LoRaWAN network, how an end device would join a LoRaWAN network if it's established. Moving forward, we'll talk about the adaptive data rate mechanism, which is yet another very advanced and sophisticated mechanism insisted in LoRaWAN. Finally, we'll do a case study after learning these two theories on gas meter deployment, which is one of the largest massive LoRaWAN gas meter deployment in India. And then finally, we'll have some time reserved for Q&A. So we'll speak for around 1.5 hours, and we'll take the Q&A thereafter. So let's begin. The topics for the today are divided into typically 3 sections. Starting from join mechanism, as I said, we'll start from the very basics. We'll start from the scratch, understand each and everything that an end device needs to know in order to join a LoRaWAN network. What is the channel plan? What should be the transmit power limit on the end devices? What data rate that needs to follow? Packet format, how does a LoRaWAN packet looks like? How does a join request packet looks like? And so on and so forth. Within this discussion on join mechanism, we'll cover a lot of many jargons, frequency spectrum, unlicensed band, a lot of things. But we'll start from the scratch and go step by step and move further. The second section will be on the ADR mechanism. And again, we'll talk about data packets, what is the packet size limits on different data rates, how collisions happen in a LoRaWAN network, and essentially understand how ADR algorithm works at its core. And during this discussion, we'll walk through a lot of different jargons again. Finally, we'll compile all of our theory within the next 28 slides and then look at a very interesting thing. And that is a case study on a massive LoRaWAN gas meter deployment in India. So without any further ado, just get into this interesting and all exciting stuff, the join mechanism in LoRaWAN. So to begin with, we need to understand the network architecture itself. And we discussed this in depth in LoRaWAN 101 and 201, right? We have end devices in the network, which carry a large fraction of the entire network. These are the ones that are present in the most dense state. And then we have the gateways, followed by network server. All the gateways belong to a particular network operators are connected to a common network server that is called as the network server, common central server that is called as a network server. All the devices transaction come to the gateway, are routed to the network server, and then routed to an application server. So if we look into a device, zoom into the device, this is how a typical LoRaWAN device looks like. It has 3 major components, starting with a microcontroller, a sensor, and a radio on the right. Sensor information is collected on the microcontroller, fed into the LoRaWAN stack, and it goes to the LoRa radio. From there, it transmits it wirelessly into the medium. This is called as an end device, right? To bring the network intelligence into the end device comes in with the LoRaWAN stack, and that's instilled inside the microcontroller over here. That's where the network intelligence in the end device comes from. It's residing inside the microcontroller, which is brain of the entire end device. And the LoRaWAN stack itself provides it as a network intelligence, how this device can interact with the network and interact with the network seamlessly. So this entire network architecture, how will an end device, if as a user you would like to have one of your end devices join a LoRaWAN network, how would you join that network? There are so many components in between. And we'll understand all of those components, starting from channel plan, going to join accept. But so far, we don't know nothing. So let's begin. Channel plan. What is a channel plan? Essentially, any wireless communication technologies work on a specific frequency, a center frequency. And these center frequency go as low as a few kilohertz and up to 6 gigahertz and above, with millimeter wave communication technologies coming into the picture. So this entire set of frequency is called a frequency spectrum. Now, licensed communication technologies are allocated specific bands in this entire frequency. For an example, a hypothetical example, in India, the cellular operators like Jio, BSNL, and so on and so forth, they have a specific band reserved for them. For example, 2300 megahertz to 2310 megahertz in India will be reserved for GSM band. That means our mobile phones will communicate with the base stations. Our mobile phones radios will communicate with the radios of the base station using these frequencies. The frequency will belong within this specific band. There will be multiple number of frequencies that will lie within this band, and our radios, our mobile phone radios, will communicate using those frequencies to the base station and vice versa. So this explanation is good for licensed communication technology that has a fixed band allocated to them. LoRaWAN, however, is actually an unlicensed spectrum communication technology. That means in this entire spectrum, a large fraction of it is actually reserved for licensed communication technology, and then some fraction is reserved for unlicensed communication technology, and LoRaWAN is one of them. In India, the spectrum, the channel band, which is reserved for unlicensed communication technology, which is also known as ISM band, is reserved between 865 to 867 megahertz. So that's where LoRaWAN will work, right? Between 865 to 867, there will be multiple channels, and our LoRaWAN radio should transmit on these channels in order to join a LoRaWAN network. The question is, the ISM bands are not constant across the globe. For India, it will vary from 865 to 867. For USA, it will be different. For Europe, it will be different. How do you know, wherever you are present, what's the ISM band reserved for you? You will do Google, you will try to find it online. Sometimes you might find it, sometimes you might not find it. It could be a tedious task, isn't it? All of this hard work has been done for us by the LoRa Alliance. There is a dedicated work group which is working on a document, which is an open source document that allows you to see what kind of channel plan is working for LoRaWAN in India or in USA or in Europe, different countries. And this document is very regularly updated by the regional parameter work group, and you can find it online. We'll give the link after the webinar. You can find it by just Googling LoRaWAN regional parameters by LoRa Alliance. That's its open source. So how does this document look like? If you look at the index, you will find out that almost any country in the world, and this is being regularly updated because LoRaWAN is being adopted in a variety of different countries. You can see Canada, Asia, Korea, Russia, India, so on and so forth, all the countries, and their channel bands, their frequencies are listed over here. And that's where I found that LoRaWAN works between 865 to 867 in India. The typo is 857. So as you can see, in India, the LoRaWAN will work between 865 to 867 megahertz, but there's more to it. And what's that? And that is listed in this document also. It says that within this band, you will be using 3 channel frequencies to join a LoRaWAN network. As you can see on the screen, 865.0625, 865.4025, and 865.9850. These are the 3 center frequencies that the device should transmit their join requests on. Right. So within this entire band, there are 8 different channels that device can transmit its data on, but 3 channels are mandatory. And these are the mandatory channels on which the device will transmit its information and that particular join request information. If it's transmitting its information of join on any other frequency, the gateways will not accept it. So we must know which channel plan we are working on, what are the frequencies that are allocated within this channel plan, and which 3 or 4 or 5 mandatory frequencies within your channel plan. Once you know it, you can join the LoRaWAN network. But before that, you also look at this column between modulation and channel frequency, and the column is of bandwidth. And it says that the LoRa signal, which is sending the join request, it should be at 125 kilohertz. What does that mean? So this is a generic explanation for any wireless communication technology. At a center frequency F, a signal will traverse between a bandwidth of B megahertz or B kilohertz and so on and so forth. So as you can see, at the center frequency 866.3 megahertz, the signal will dwell between minus 62.5 kilohertz on the left and plus 62.5 kilohertz on the right. Right? So the signal will have frequency between these two low and upper frequencies. And that's how an entire signal, which is transmitting its joint frequency, would look like. So we have covered a spectrum trace of an actual LoRaWAN signal, which is captured in our office. As you can see, it has covered 8 channels. Out of these, 3 channels are mandatory, as we have listed on the left. And if you zoom in any of these channels, the device has actually covered a specific channel with a bandwidth of 125 kilohertz. So within this one slide, we were able to capture the entirety of channel plan. We were able to understand that LoRaWAN is unlicensed spectrum communication technologies. We understood that it has 8 channels, and you can find those channels in the LoRaWAN regional parameter specification. These channels, out of 8, there are 3 mandatory channels on which the device should send the join request. And then finally, what is the bandwidth? The bandwidth of that signal should be 125 kilohertz. If it's using 62.5 kilohertz or anything else, it will be ignored. Good. So we have come one ladder up, right? We are close to letting the device join a LoRaWAN network. So far, we know what's the channel plan of the device should be like. What's the next thing? It's the transmit power limit. We understood in depth about transmit power in our previous 101 and 201. And typically, what transmit power is, the amount of power gathered by the end device radio on its power amplifier and given to the antenna. That's the transmit power. And typically, what we see in LoRaWAN and devices, the transmit power varies from -4 dBm to 20 dBm. That's a typical range that we see. But the limit of transmit power in any specific region is not on the transmit power itself, rather on the AIRP. And AIRP, the full form of it is equivalent isotropically radiated power. What does that mean? Very simple. It's almost equivalent to transmit power, except for there is connector loss that is associated with the antenna. Antenna might have its own gain and loss. All of this added together, whatever that is coming out from this entire end device, this is called as the AIRP. So the limitation in any region is on the AIRP. You cannot transmit your information gathering AIP of 40 dBm, for example. Right? You have a limit below which you will have to work, and that's different for different region. And you can also find this limit in the regional parameter specification. For India, the limits are not that aggressive. You can transmit your end device with 30 dBm of transmit power if you want to, and ARP. So if you look at the table again, we are trying to join a network. We know the channel plan. We know all the things within the channel plan, frequencies, bandwidth, and so on and so forth. And we also know the transmit power or ARP limit of our end device. What's the next thing? The next thing is the data rate. So when the device is transmitting the join request, it needs to send the information using a specific data rate. And in LoRaWAN, as we have seen in the previous webinars as well, the data rate varies from data rate 0 to data rate 5. There are different types of data rate modes in LoRaWAN. And they go as low as 30 bits per second to 5 kilobits, 7 kilobits per second. If we change the data rate, essentially we're impacting these 4 main factors that are the time on air, the time it takes to transmit a packet, receiver sensitivity, at to what point the device, that is the receiver, will be able to capture the data rate signal, the range, and the battery. So we have created a graph for you that will give you a very good essence of how data rate affects these 4 elements. Starting from data rate 0, if you will see, the time it takes to transmit a payload using data rate 0 is quite high, because you're using 30 bits per second, for example, and you're transmitting, let's say, 10 bytes of payload. You will take a lot of time, right? Compared to any other data rate 5, for example, 5 kilobits per second. It's just like you have a good internet speed or you have bad internet speed. A bad internet speed, that means you're going to take a lot of time to download something. But good internet speed, you'll download it quicker. Likewise, in LoRaWAN, you're using data rate 0, it will take a lot of time for you to transmit the information. But the good part, so that's the negative part of the data rate 0. But the good part of the data rate 0 is that the signal will have quite low receiver sensitivity. What that means is that that signal, even if it incurs a lot of path loss due to buildings, distance, trees, so on and so forth, it will still be able to demodulate it at the receiver end, because that signal has a fairly low receiver sensitivity. What that means is, in a layman's sense, that a data rate 0 signal will have a impressively long range. It takes a lot of time to transmit that information, yes, but that information will travel, oh boy, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, and so on. A drawback of data rate 0 is that you're transmitting information and you're taking a lot of time to transmit it. And hence, your end device will drain batteries quicker, right? It will current consumption of the end device will be high. And that means that if you're constantly using data rate 0 to transmit information, you will drain your battery quicker. That's a drawback of data rate 0. If you take a mid data rate, for example, data rate 3, the time on air to transmit that information will be in the middle. Receiver sensitivity will not that good, but at least better than data rate 5. Range will a little compromise, but your battery will not drain that quicker. On the opposite polarity, however, data rate 5, you will see the moment you want to send something, it will be sent in a matter of milliseconds, right? That's the positive aspect of data rate 5. But that signal cannot travel a long range because its receiver sensitivity is not good. The SNR limit is not good. But the good part is, since you're transmitting it very quickly, your radio doesn't have to be on for a long time. That means you will have a fairly long battery life. So these are the three trade-offs, or four trade-offs that you can see that are impacted by using different data rates within LoRa. Okay? So you have to vary about which data rates you're using, keeping in mind those factors. But as we see, as we add LoRaWAN into the picture, there's something extra that adds, something a little complicated that's added, which is for a purpose, which we'll discover why. And that is the limit, the packet size limit of the data rate packet. For example, if you're using data rate 0, you can transmit a packet of up to 51 bytes of application payload. You cannot transmit 60 bytes using data rate 0. If you want to, that means your data will be fragmented and then will be transmitted. At a time, using data rate 0 in India, you can transmit only 51 bytes of application payload. However, if you see, if you're using data rate 5, you can go as high as 242 bytes, right? So apart from these four elements that we see that impact the data rate, there is another thing, and that is the size of the packet that you can transmit using a particular data rate, right? But the question is, what these MAC payload and application payload means. I mean, I just directly put a table and then tell you that that's a limit on packet size, didn't give you much description. We have to discover it, right? But so far we have discovered the channel plan, the transmit power limit, and the data rate. These are the things that are necessary for the device to join a network. But the next thing that we should know is about the packet format. Without we knowing what MAC payload, application payload means, we cannot appreciate why LoRaWAN data rate, which is low, doesn't give us the ability to transmit packet of large packet size. So for that, the next section, that is the packet format of LoRaWAN. So one thing we saw is MAC payload, and the other was the application payload. If we think intuitively, what would an application payload mean? It's an information related to the use case or your application. For example, you have an end device, you have a sensor associated with it. If you have a temperature sensor, then that temperature sensor data will be given to the microcontroller. Right? If you have a waste bin sensor, then waste bin sensor data will be coming to the microcontroller. Depending on your application, your information will change. That means your application payload will change. And so that's the definition of application payload. Right? This application payload essentially goes to your microcontroller and is passed on to the LoRaWAN stack, right? The intelligence of the entire end device. The application payload from the sensor is given to the microcontroller. Microcontroller passes it to a system called LoRaWAN stack. The output of that system is an entire LoRaWAN packet. And as you can see, within this entire LoRaWAN packet, there is a specific spot reserved for application payload. It's not that the LoRaWAN stack take the application payload and just directly give it to the radio. No, it puts it somewhere within a large packet, that somewhere that specific spot is reserved for the application payload. And there are other things along with the application payload in the LoRaWAN packet. And that is essentially transmitted to the radio, and then radio modulates it and transmits it over the air. Okay? So that's a LoRaWAN packet. Okay? It contains fields other than application payload as well. So, and within that entire LoRaWAN packet, there is an application payload. There is a specific spot reserved for you to carry the application payload information as well. And this packet format is standardized across the network. So the end device will use this specific packet format to transmit information. The gateway will understand that packet format. The network server will also understand this packet format, and so on and so forth. Because if everybody don't use a standardized packet format, then it's hard for you to decode at the receiver where is your application payload or where is the other section, and so on and so forth. So this packet format is standardized across the network. But what do this entire packet format essentially carry? We initially were thinking that this entire packet format will only carry the application payload, but that's not the case. There is a specific spot reserved for the application payload, and there are 1,000 other things that are going on over here. What are these things? Typically, they are divided into 3 sections. The first section contains the preamble, the packet header, and the packet header CRC. These are FHIR related. If you want to go into depths of each, the preamble will essentially be nothing but a signal to the receiver saying that, hey, just wake up. I want to transmit you something. Just listen to me. So it sends you a signal before the actual information saying that, hey, heads up, wake up. Once the preamble is done, you send the packet header. Packet header essentially contains information related to the physical layer parameter. For example, what's the length of the packet? What's the CRC being used in the packet? We understood all of this in the previous webinar. And then to checksum this particular packet header, we have a packet header CRC. After that, the FHIR payload starts. And the FHIR payload is essentially the place where all the magic happens. And as you can see, within the FHIR payload, actually the application payload resides. And then finally, we have the CRC of this entire packet, which is used to correct and detect the errors. So this is a typical LoRaWAN packet. This is how it looks like, right? So if we disintegrate this packet further and look into the FHIR payload, the FHIR payload may contain one out of these 3 things. It could either contain a join request message, which is what we are interested in, right? Just don't forget the aim. We started with letting the device join a network, and we understood a couple of things. We got into the LoRaWAN packet, and now we are trying to figure out if we want to send a join request, then how should a packet look like? So we understood that this is how a packet looks like, and within the FHIR payload, you could either have join request message, join accept message, or you can send the sensor data, which will come in the data/mac commands. So this is how typically LoRaWAN packet looks like, and this is how the FHIR payload can be disintegrated. The FHIR payload may contain either of these 3 things, not all of them simultaneously. So if I disintegrate the FHIR payload further, when I'm sending a join request message, then it will contain 3 things: the MAC header, the join request field, and the MIC field. This is how a LoRaWAN packet in case of a join request would look like. This is how the FHIR payload will look like in case of a join request message. In case of a join accept message, the structure will be a little different. We'll have a MAC header again, but we'll only have the join accept. There's no MIC while join accept message is transmitted. And then finally, when you're transmitting information, right? When you're transmitting the application payload, you have MAC header, MAC payload, and MIC. And somewhere here, right, we have the application payload residing. So when you're transmitting information, you could either transmit a join request. That means you're requesting that, hey, I want to join a network. That is a join request. In that case, this is how the structure would look like. When the network server says, okay, I accept your request, I'm sending you the join accept. This is how the structure would look like. And then finally, when you're transmitting the signals, which is actually containing the information about your application, which is containing data/mac commands, this is how your payload would look like. 3 different types of packets. We must know about this, right? But just don't forget our aim. We actually wanted to understand if we were to join a LoRaWAN network, how should everything look like? So in case of join request message, let's disintegrate this further and see how does a join request packet looks like. So in case of join request message, we have a FHIR payload, and within FHIR payload, we have a MAC header field, we have a join request field, and the MIC field. Within the MAC header field, we have a couple of other fields as well. If you disintegrate the MAC header, it contains the M type, the RFU, and major. What are these things? M type essentially contains the message type. So it contains whether this packet is a join request, whether this packet is a join accept. So there are different. 00 means FHIR payload actually contains the join request message. M type 01 means FHIR payload actually contains the join accept message. 010 means, and so on and so forth. So M type essentially defines what exactly this packet is intended for. We have some bits reserved for future use in the RFU, and then we have the protocol major version, right? We have the major version of the protocol. So LoRaWAN is very frequently getting updated. Like initially we had LoRaWAN 1.0.0, 1.0.01, so and so forth. We are seeing LoRaWAN being updated, so and so forth. So we have to tell within the packet that is coming from an end device, what's the major of the LoRaWAN that is being used. So 1.1, from 1.1, the major will be 1, and 1.2, the minor will be 2. So we are actually capturing the major of the LoRaWAN that is running on the end device within the 5 payloads MAC header field. Okay. This is helpful for the network server to understand what kind of packet it is and which LoRaWAN stack is being running on the packet. In the join request field, actually, this is where all the magic happens. In the join request field, you'll have 3 major things. So when the device is sending information in order to join a network, these are the 3 key elements that it has to send in order to join a network. And these are DevNonce, DevUI, and JoinUI. DevNonce used to be a random number, but in the previous LoRaWAN updates, the DevNonce has become an incremental number. Every time the device is sending a join request, it has to increment a hexadecimal number and send the join request with it. It has to be unique, and every time it has to be incremented. That's a DevNonce. DevUI is a globally unique identifier of an end device. So if you're purchasing an end device from a vendor, then he will give you the DevUI of that device. And that DevUI is a unique identifier, globally unique identifier of your end device. No other device will have the same DevUI as your device. And then finally, the third information that the end device needs to carry in its join request message is the join UI. What is a join UI? And this is a concept which is fairly new. It's the latest one. If you'll see other videos, if you'll see other blogs, this is particularly not updated because this has been recently launched in the newest version of LoRaWAN. So it is important to understand what join UI essentially means. So if you have a vendor, right? So we have vendors like Tectelic, and we have vendors like Moco, and so on and so forth. We have different vendors that are manufacturing devices in the world, LoRaWAN end devices. While they manufacture those devices, they manufacture those devices with a specific join server, right? So all the devices that belong to a particular vendor will have a common join server. And the globally unique identifier of that join server will be its join UI. So to understand in a layman's sense, a vendor is given a specific join server, which has a join UI associated with it, and it will manufacture all its devices with join UI fleshed as the vendor's allocated join UI. This is how typically the concept of join UI works. Sometimes some vendors have a specific series of products. For example, Tectelic is making home sensors, then all the home sensors will be given a specific join UI. If Tectelic is also making GPS trackers, then they will have a join server allocated for all the GPS tracker devices, and so on and so forth. So we have to understand from our vendor, from whoever we are procuring the end device, what's the join UI of this particular end device. So just note, these are the 3 major things that are sent in the join request and nothing else. Apart from that, there is a MIC that has been calculated, as you can see above. That is also coming in the join request message, but there is no transmission of app key or application session key or session keys, nothing. It's just these things that are transmitted over there. The last thing, as you see, is the MIC. It's the message integrity check. That is also transmitted in the LoRaWAN join request packet. This is actually a number that is generated using, randomly generated using DevUI, JoinUI, DevNonce, and then there are other factors that are involved like app key and so on and so forth. So MIC is a number that is calculated using a dedicated function, and the input to those functions are DevNonce, DevUI, JoinUI, app key, and some other things as well. So this is typically what is sent when an end device needs to join a network. So far, we started with channels, we understood transmit power limit, we looked at the data rates, we saw what a LoRaWAN packet looks like, and then we dwelled into how a join request packet would look like. And we are pretty close to closing our section on join mechanism, right? But we have to look at the join accept as well, because you have sent the join request from the end device, gateway has received the join request, the network server will then trigger the join accept also. So how does a join accept message looks like? We saw that LoRaWAN packet could contain join request, join accept, or MAC or data payload. Right? In case of a join accept, you will see these 3 to 5 things. It has dev header, a join nonce, net ID, downlink settings, and receiver delay. Now, whenever an end device successfully joins a LoRaWAN network, it is given a particular dev header. Now, dev header is small in size. It's not globally unique, but it's a unique address of the device within a specific network, right? And this is typically given to the end device. And once the device joins a LoRaWAN network, it is referenced using the dev header, not its dev UI, because dev header is small in size. It doesn't take a lot of bytes to reference a particular end device. So dev header is a address which is allocated by the network server to the end device. In the join accept, when the gateway is sending this join request in the form of a downlink to the end device, it carries the dev address and then it carries the join nonce. It is yet another counter to keep track of the join accept messages, how many join accepts have been given to a particular end device and so on and so forth. That is captured in the join nonce. And then you finally have net ID, which is a network ID. This is unique for a particular network operator. Different network operators are allocated different net IDs by the LoRa Alliance. The other two things are preliminary. These are basically downlink settings and the receiver delay. So the join request message has a couple of things. That is dev UI, the dev UI, the join UI, and the MIC along with the dev nonce. And join accept has these 5 things. So whenever there is a transaction between join request and accept, this is actually happening behind the scenes. To appreciate this concept a little better, to look at it from a very animative perspective, just let's look at it with an animation. So the device wants to send a join request. It wants to join a LoRaWAN network. So it will first send the join request message. This join request message will be passed to the network server, and network server will process the join request. If the device has been registered on the network server will allow the end device to join the network. And then it will trigger a join request, join accept, and that will go to the gateway, and then gateway will pass it to the end device, right? This is how the entire system is. So we have understood it from the very scratch. We understood which frequencies will the device transmit at join on, transmit power limit, data rate, packet format. I'll keep repeating that. Join request, how does a join request packet looks like, what exactly it contains, what is a join accept packet will contain, but we still don't get the entire feel of the join mechanism. So let's look at that from a process perspective. We have end device, we have gateway, we have a network server, and we have an application server. So whenever the end device wants to join a network, it will essentially creates a join request, as we understood. And that join request message will have dev nonce, dev UI, and join UI. This entirety will be contained inside a join request field within the LoRaWAN packet. And then there are MAC header and MIC within LoRaWAN packet as well. So this entirety will compose of a 5 payload. And then you have, what do we call that? Preamble, packet header CRC, and the CRC of the packet. This entirety is actually called as a join request packet. Okay? And this is sent by the end device to the gateway. Gateway forwards it to the network server. The network server sees that packet and sees that, okay, this is a join request. I will forward it to the dedicated join server. How the network server will know which join server this needs to be routed to? It will decode the packet. It will look at the join UI, and it will see which join UI belongs to which join server, and it will forward it to that join server. Network server is the brain of the entire system. It actually contains all different join servers. So the network server will forward that join request packet to a particular join server, and it will look at some join nonce and dev nonce, and it will see if this particular end device has tried to join before with the same dev nonce or not. If not, it's great, and it will just trigger a join accept message. Right? The join server will create a join accept message, which we saw will contain 5 different fields: the dev header, join nonce, net ID, downlink settings, and receiver delay. All of this combined will be called as a join accept message, and the join server will get it to the network server. Network server will route it to the gateway, and then gateway will route it to the end device. Now, both end device and join server have the dev UI, the dev nonce, and join nonce. Using these 3 things, they will actually make their session keys. So you see, if you're working in LoRaWAN universe, you will be regularly encountering these keys, typically, or more importantly, the application session key and the network session key. So that's what, and that's how these are derived. And device triggers a join request message. It goes to the gateway, it goes to the network server, it goes to the join server. And you can see the session keys are derived by both end device and network server generating the session keys. And the next time the device will transmit its payload, it will encrypt that payload using these session keys. Now, one thing that you saw, the application session key is not residing within the network server itself. It is given to the application server. For example, Ginger is very commonly used IoT application server. The network server forwards the application session key to the Ginger, the application server, because the application payload is actually encrypted using the application session key. And nor the gateway, neither the network server, nobody should be able to decode it. So the application session key is given to the application server so that only the application server can decode the application payload. So this is how an entire join mechanism works in LoRaWAN. It's hard to assimilate it in the one go. If you look at this webinar on the YouTube once again, you'll be able to better appreciate all the concepts. So let's move on to the next section then, because our device has joined the network now, right? The device has joined the network. It has sent the join request. It has forwarded to it has been forwarded to the network server. Network server has triggered a join accept that has gone to the gateway, and the device has received its join accept. So we have done this thing so far using all the different things that we have learned in the table, right? Now, what's the next thing that will happen? The end device will not send join request anymore because it has already joined the network. Rather, it will collect its sensor data and start packaging it into the LoRaWAN packet, and then start sending it to the gateway. Gateway will forward to the network server, and everything will go seamlessly from there. But we saw that a LoRaWAN packet could either contain join request, join accept, or a data/MAC command packet. So whenever a device would want to send the application payload, it will not send it in the join request, of course. It will encapsulate the entire packet into the data/MAC command. So that's why it's highlighted in orange. It's a different than join request or accept. So if you look at this particular packet, which is data/MAC packet, and again disintegrated, you will find out it has three things, right? What's different between the join request and data/MAC packet is the MAC payload. MAC payload is not inside the join request, not it's inside the join accept. It's only in case of data/MAC packet, you will find a MAC payload term. MAC header will essentially contain the same things that we saw, the major and the packet type. The MAC payload is exactly where all the magic is happening. If you disintegrate the MAC payload, you will find out you will have frame header, frame port, and frame payload. Within the frame header, you're having a couple of important things. And these things are related to the stack itself. These things are very sophisticatedly designed within the LoRaWAN stack, which allows the end device to seamlessly work in a LoRaWAN network. We'll discover them one by one, but we already know what a dev header means, right? Dev header is an address given to the end device from a network server. The frame control and frame count we'll discover subsequently. But the most important thing to note at this particular side is the frame ops. So frame ops essentially is the place where the MAC commands are residing. So the end device and gateway are talking to each other. It's not that they're always sending the application payload and it's only the application payload that's being transmitted in the network. There are other things in the network that are required as well. You want to give some information about the network from the gateway to the end device. The end device would want to respond to some instruction related to the network to the gateway. All of these are actually called as the MAC commands, and MAC commands are actually stored inside the frame ops field of the MAC payload within the frame header. So that's where the MAC commands reside. However, there's another field within the MAC payload which is called as a frame port, right? Frame port is of 1 byte, and frame port can, since it's about 1 byte, it can vary from 0 to 255, typically 0 to 225. If it's 0, if frame port is defined as 0 in the LoRaWAN network, then the frame payload, which is of n bytes, will carry the MAC commands. So MAC commands could either come in the frame ops field or it could come in the frame payload field. And who will decide that? The frame port will decide that. If frame port is 0, then you're given that the frame payload essentially comprises of MAC command. If it's not the case, if frame port is not 0, then it's given that the frame ops will contain the MAC commands in the LoRaWAN network. Right? So this was the case of a data/MAC packet. But so far we haven't seen where the application payload is transmitted, because we are talking about data/MAC payload and we are not seeing the application payload being transmitted. So how does that being transmitted? So within the MAC header, within the MAC payload, we have frame header, frame port, and frame payload. Frame header, as we saw, contains dev header, frame control, frame count, frame ops. Within the frame control, we have a couple of bits, right? And these are related to the network. We'll not deep dive into all of these, but one bit, which is the name of our section itself, and that is the ADR. So this is ADR bit, and we have to essentially keep this bit as on. This is to keep this bit as on so that you can leverage the advanced features of the ADR. So just note that within the Mac payload, you have frame header, and within the frame header, you have frame control. And frame control has a particular bit reserved, which is containing the ADR bit. And you have to keep the ADR bit as on in order to leverage the ADR mechanism. But so far, we actually want to look at where our application payload is residing, right? So the frame port will not contain 0, and it will contain anything other than 0 between 1 to 225, will mean that the frame payload actually contains the application payload. So this is how a typical LoRaWAN data/Mac packet looks like. It will contain the Mac commands in the frame ops field, and the frame port will not be 0, and anything other than 0 between 1 to 225 means that the application payload is actually carried in the frame payload. So the next time you see a LoRaWAN packet, you'll know that the frame apps is actually the place where the Mac commands are contained. The frame port value is between 1 to 225, and the frame payload will actually contain the application payload. So this is how a LoRaWAN packet looks like when the device is transmitting the application payload. So we started with a couple of things, right? We started to see the LoRaWAN packet, and we saw different data rates. And within different data rates, we saw that there is a limitation on what's the maximum size of a Mac payload could be, and what's the maximum size of the application payloads could be, right? We looked at this in this particular table, right? In this particular section, we were discussing about data rate. So the question is that we now know what an application payload means, what an application payload and what a Mac payload means. But why do low data rates have to suffer from the packet size restriction? Why you cannot send a packet of 51 bytes, more than 51 bytes using data rate 0? Why the restrictions are particularly on the data rate 0? To understand that and appreciate it from the depth, we'll have to understand this radar. So you see, we have already plotted time. We have seen that the data rate 0 will take the most time on air to transmit a packet, but that signal will not have, the signal will have a very good receiver sensitivity. Hence, that signal will have a long range. However, we'll drain our batteries quicker. But since LoRaWAN is being used, we'll see that the data rate 0 packet cannot transmit a very large packet, right? It can only transmit a 51 byte of packet, which is in itself large, but comparatively, compared to other data rates, you cannot send a packet using data rate 0 above 51 bytes of application payload. So that's why data rate 0 cannot send packet size of a large byte. On the opposite polarity, however, in data rate 5's case, the time it takes to transmit an information will be less. Receiver sensitivity will not be that good. Range will essentially be compromised, but your battery will be quite good because you're not taking a lot of time to transmit packet. But the good part about data rate 5 is that you can transmit application payload as high as 242 bytes. So now you see the radar getting a little bit complicated, but if you have heard it from the very beginning, followed it religiously, it is all making sense. The one thing that has added is the packet size. But why? Why is that the data rate 0s are not allowed to use packet size more than 51 bytes? The question lies in the theory of collision, how collision works. So we'll look at the theory of collision from a very practical perspective, and we'll compile this within 20 minutes of time. And then we'll look at this theory into an application from a case study perspective as well. So you have two buildings on your screen, and you have another building in between. That building is having the LoRaWAN gateway actually. So what's happening is that we recently did a deployment in commercial grade society. So we have in a society number of buildings. These buildings are of like typically 15, 20 floors high. And then you have some villas and so on and so forth. So in a society based environment, there was a LoRaWAN network that was deployed. And we had a gateway which was residing in the center of the building. A couple of other gateways, but for example, we had one gateway that was residing in center of the building. Now, all the end devices that were residing on these buildings typically the gas meter devices, were communicating with the gateway that was in the center of the building. So that's how the network architecture was in our recent deployments of gas meters. So we have a society-based environment. We had a couple of buildings, and we had a building in between on which we had the gateway. We had other gateways as well, but for this example, we had a building in between on which we had the gateway, and all the end devices on both of the buildings, the gas meter devices, were communicating with the gateway. So they were transmitting information from their buildings and transmitting it to the center of the building, which is having the gateway. Now, when we are having such a scenario, when an end device, let's assume for a moment, we don't have many end devices in the network right now. We have just one device, and that one device is carrying the application payload. It's transmitting the information. When it's doing so, it will use a certain channel. We saw that there are 8 channels available, and the device could use any of those 8 channels to transmit the information. At this time, let's only assume that it's using a fixed channel, and it's transmitting information 5 times within 12 hours of time. So it transmits information at 12 p.m. and then it transmits at 3 p.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m. So it's an application payload, and it's an application requirement that the device has to transmit 5 times within 12 hours. So whenever the device transmits an information at 12 p.m., it will use a specific channel. And we are assuming for this moment that device always uses a particular channel, let's say channel 0, and the device transmits information. And the network will run seamlessly so far. There's no problem. The moment another device is added onto this network, there's something that will go wrong. And what is that? Whenever the next device will transmit information and communicate with the same gateway using the same frequencies and at the same time instances, both of these 2 packets will collide. Why? Both of the packets are transmitting at the same time interval. They are all waking up at 12 p.m. They are all transmitting information at the same time using the same frequency. Of course, they will collide in time. And what we are seeing here is that there are just 2 devices in the network, and we are seeing collisions happening. So the gateway will not be able to demodulate either of the packets or only just one packet. And we are seeing collisions happening in the network. And we have heard, and this has been told, right? We see this in different press releases that a gateway, a LoRaWAN gateway, can cater up to 5,000, 10,000 of end devices. But within 2 end devices, we are seeing collisions are happening. Why is that? Because we have kept a couple of things constant. We have assumed that both the end devices are using the same channel. The channels being used by the end device are not different. And all of them are transmitting at the same time instance. That's an assumption. And also we're assuming that both of the end devices are actually using the same data rate. So there's nothing different in how these end devices are operating. They're using the same channel. So if we assume, let's tweak one of these parameters out of these 3, channel, T0 and data rate. If I just tweak one parameter, which is the channel, then what will happen? The end device 1 will transmit the information at 12 o'clock again, and it will use not channel 0, but channel 5, for example. It will use randomly out of the 8 channels, just one channel, and it will transmit the information. On the other hand, the second end device will also choose a random channel out of 8 and transmit the information. And when it does so, even though both of the end devices are transmitting at the same time instance, at the same time 0 and using the same data rate, they will not collide, actually, because they're using different frequencies. They're using different channel frequencies, and because of that, their packets will not collide at the gateway. Likewise, at different time instances, they can randomly choose a channel and transmit an information. That way, you will not collide, even though you're colliding in time, you'll not collide in frequency with another packet, and hence the gateway will be able to demodulate both of the packets, and network will start running seamlessly. So the point to note here is that to avoid collision, basically channel randomization works very well. But is it good enough? Is it something that should suffice for a massive network to run? Let's see. We have so far 2 end devices in the network, and I've added a couple of more. Let's say 100 more end devices in the network. And I'm relying on the same concept. I'm relying on the concept that end devices will use a random channel, and they will start transmitting their packets on same time instance. Now, what will happen when we are having low number of end devices in the network? This will work. But after some time, there will be an end device which will use exactly the same frequency as the first device. What's happening is that the probability that 2 end devices using the same channel in order to transmit information increases when we have more end devices in the network. I'll repeat. Whenever we have more end devices in the network, the probability that two end devices will transmit information at the same time using the same channel frequencies increases. So the probability of using the same channel frequency has increased. That means that there will again be a collision. So what we are seeing is that we were able to mitigate collision up to a certain number of end devices, but the moment we gone above 100 or 150, we are seeing collisions happening again, which is again contrary to what we are listening in case of LoRaWAN gateways, right? They cater to 5,000, 7,000 end devices, and we are seeing collisions happening at 100 end devices themselves. So what we are missing? Let's look at our table again. Let's look at our table. Our table says, and we have assumed that devices are using different channels, of course. We have taken care of channel randomization, but we have also assumed that the devices are using the same instance, the same time zero to initiate their packet transmission. All of them will wake up at 12 p.m. All of them will transmit at the same time. And that essentially means the packet collision rate will be high in that case. So what if we change that? What if we just zoom into this particular section at around 12 p.m. Let's see how things are working. If you look at 12 p.m. in scenario A, within 12 p.m. 00 minute 00 seconds and 12 p.m. 00 minute 002 seconds, for example, within this 2 seconds of interval starting from 12 p.m. and device 1 transmitted frequency, it transmits channel using say frequency 1. And the time it takes to transmit that information is 500 milliseconds. Now what happens? The 100th device will also start transmitting at 12 p.m. and it will also take 500 milliseconds to transmit that information. That means that both of them will collide, of course, because you're using the same frequency and they're also colliding in time. Both of these packets will be destroyed and the gateway will not be able to hear any of them. However, if I will be a little smart, depending upon the application, because you're using gas meters, right? If your gas meter information is coming at 12:00:00 and 12:00:02, it doesn't matter much. So why not if I'm using an end device, let's say end device 1 at 12:00:00 and let it transmit and let it do the transmission at 12 p.m. Let it be. And it takes 500 millisecond time on it to transmit a packet. But for the 100th end device, why not I use another time slot to do the same transmission? I just want to transmit at 12 p.m. I know, but just give an offset of 2 seconds and do the transmission. That way, two end devices will not be colliding in time, and hence there will not be any collision. So in scenario 1, when I was not having any offset randomization, so what offset randomization means that if you want to transmit at a particular time instance, you will transmit at that particular time instance added with the offset, which is a random offset depending upon the periodicity. For example, between 12 p.m. to 3 p.m., you can choose any offset, right? You can transmit at 12 p.m., 10 seconds, 12 p.m., 20 seconds. That 12 p.m. data will definitely come, but you have to keep that offset in mind. So that's why it is said that offset randomization mitigates collision within the same channel. So there are two ways we have understood so far in this theory of collision to mitigate collision actually. And that is to randomize the channels, use different channels at different transmissions, and use offset randomization. Don't always try to transmit all the end devices at the same time. Rather, take an offset randomization and do the transmission. But is it good enough? Again, we keep on asking this question because we still need to answer that whether LoRaWAN gateways can support up to 5,000, 10,000 of devices that we see. So we saw that channel randomization and offset randomization cater to our needs to some extent. And as you can see, this is happening. But let's say we have 100 or 500 devices, but 5,000 devices coming into the game. So for example, this is a particular use case, which was gas meter. Within this society, if somebody wants to use, smart parking solution, they will have cars and they will, have an end device associated with that car. And that end device will also use this gateway to transmit its information, right? If such a case arrives, then offset randomization will not work because this use case had different demands. This use case might want to transmit information rather more frequently within 3 hours. So your particular solution will not work because this will work up to, let's say, 5,000 end devices, but you have another use case getting into the picture, the scene gets disturbed entirely because the parking sensor will try to transmit packets at its random time whenever it wants to and very frequently. And it's highly likely that the packets from this use case will collide with the packets from the other use case. So how do we mitigate that? Because it's not that a smart city will comprise of only one particular kind of a solution. There will be, smart utilities like smart water meters, smart gas meters. You will see parking, smart dustbin, different and thousands of types of verticals, right? So how do one gateway or a couple of gateways can cater to that need? For that, we have to get one step ahead. We again look at the table. You see, we're coming back to the tables again and again. You're seeing the parameter channel, right? The channel was changed. We are using the randomized channel. We have changed the time offset, right? We have offset randomization. That means that all end devices not transmit at the same time, which we have seen has let our end devices transmit information with the same gateway, and that to 5,000 end devices at a time. But we want to push the limits further, right? That's what LoRaWAN does in the past couple of years. Has pushed the limits. But how it's taking care of end devices more than 5,000, for example, and our different use cases. One thing that we are missing at this point is the data rate, right? It is one thing that we have assumed. And if we tweak that, then we just unleash an unlimited potential. How? Let's look at it. And complicate this a little more. So this time, there was one building and all of the devices within that building was transmitting information to that gateway. Now I have another building that has come into the picture. I'm doubling the network just as directly, 5,000, and then I'm going to have 10,000 devices, just pushing the limits over here. So all the end devices from building A will transmit information to this gateway, and all the end devices from building B will also transmit the information to that gateway. But as you can see, the building B is a little far away, and all the end devices within that building are seeing heavy obstruction in between. So it's intuitive to understand that on the gateway side, the signal strength of building A end devices will be good, and building B end devices will not be that good. So by any chance, if building A end devices collide in time and frequency with building B devices, it's highly likely that building B devices will have their packets destroyed completely. So that's massive destruction of their end devices. None of the end devices will be able to communicate with the gateway if that happens. So we're assuming at this point that both the end devices in building A and the end devices in building B are using the same data rates. That's the assumption, right? We initially kept the assumption that all devices were using same channels. We mitigated that. We initially assumed that all devices were using the same time instance to start the transmission. We mitigated that. This time we are trying to mitigate that all end devices are using the same data. So currently the end devices from building A and B are using the same data rates. What if I change this? And let's see if I don't change this, what happens? If I have the first device transmitting information, it will take 500 milliseconds to transmit information. There will be a random offset between first and 100 we have seen. And then we have seen that till 5,000 end devices will work. At the 8,000 devices, like 8,000 devices from building B, if it transmits the packet, what will happen in that case? Collision again. And if I zoom into that, and I look that the data rate 0, so end device from building A is using data rate 0 to transmit the information. And to transmit an information using data rate 0, we have seen that it will take 500 milliseconds. And since we have assumed that the building B devices are also using data rate 0, they will also transmit the information at 500 milliseconds, right? So both of them are using the same data rate, the timer range will be same. Even though there is an offset in between, right? There is an offset to start the packet is 200 milliseconds, but we are seeing that the collision is happening. Some of the fraction of the packet is being destroyed in both of the cases. So this is what is causing collision. But if I do a small tweak, this is what the scenario way. If I do a small tweak, if I just change the data rate of the end devices in the building A, which is close to the gateway, to data rate 5, what will happen? Just think about it for a moment. If I am using data rate 0 on both the buildings, I'm seeing that there's the high probability that both of them are colliding in time. But if I be a little smart and let the nearby end devices use data rate 5, which is in case of scenario B, the transmission time, the time that it takes to transmit the payload, the same bytes of payload will not take 500 milliseconds, rather just 50 milliseconds. So the data rate 5 signal will be completed within 50 seconds, 30 milliseconds. So with that in the same environment, with the same offset and channel frequency and so on and so forth, you're seeing with an offset of 200 milliseconds, the data rate 5 and data rate 0 packet don't collide in time. So what's happening is, whatever that is near to the gateway, if it start transmitting quickly, if it start transmitting information quickly, it gives room to the end devices that are far. That gives room to the end devices that are far, and they will use data rate 0 to transmit information, and they will not collide in time. So that's the beauty and of LoRaWAN network. The data rates are distributed such that there's the minimum to the minimum interference in the network. And we have seen an example by just tweaking one parameter, by just tweaking the data rate 5 on the end devices in building A, we are seeing that the collision has been mitigated. I'm not saying that the entire collision rate will drop down to 0%, but up to a certain extent, a large extent, the collision will be mitigated by just very smartly choosing which data rate the end devices would use. So data rate distribution mitigates collision in massive networks. So we started with channels. We understood the time zero, how it affects offset randomization. And then we understood how different data rate distribution affects collision in massive networks. Now, just a quick summary of the entire theory of collision, because this section was all about ADR. We saw that different parameters like channel, the time it takes to transmit the information, the T0, the data rate, all of these factors, if they are different, they essentially mitigate the collision. In a summary, if the near end devices are using low data rates and far end devices are also using low data rate, then it's highly probable that you will see a high packet loss in your network. However, if the nearby end devices are using high data rate and far by end devices are using their low data rate, then the packet loss will be low. So this is how a typical LoRaWAN network should look like. This is an ideal condition. All the devices that are near, they are not having hard time communicating with the gateway. They're having good RSSI in the gateway. They should use high data rate like data rate 4, data rate 5, data rate 3. And as you go away from the gateway, the end devices should use data rate 0, low data rates. But who will make that thing possible? Not the building owners, right? The building owners will not go to the end device, change their firmware and ask it to start transmitting, at data rate 5 or data rate 4. Or the fire buildings will change its data rate themselves. So nobody is going to manually change the data rate of the end devices. That's not possible, right? And that is something that will vary with time. It's time variant phenomena. So we have to take care of that autonomously. We have to take care of collision mitigation autonomously, and that's where ADR comes into the picture. So the entire ADR mechanism was well thought for LoRaWAN networks that are going to be massively scaled up. And in that cases, when the LoRaWAN network will be massively scaled up, there will be an ADR mechanism that will run, which is an autonomous resource allocation scheme, adaptive data rate scheme that will allow your end devices to distribute their data rate such that you have the minimest of the minimest collision in the network. So it's ADR that will actually do this circle that you see on the screen. It will make all the end devices that are near to the gateway with data rate 5 or data rate 4, high data rates, and all the far devices will use data rate 0. And that's thanks to the ADR. And all of this will be done with the stack itself autonomously. So if you look at the algo, how ADR does that, what we are trying to say over here is using a very basic concept. And that concept is, I'm trying to explain the algo on the left, and on the right, I'm taking an example. So it will not be that hard for you to decipher from here. So it records some packets. So let's say building A devices transmit 11 packets, right? It has transmit 11 packets. All of these recorded packets will be recorded on the network server. It will keep an array of all the SNRs of the packets from building A. Then it will calculate the SNR maximum. So within this array, it will find the maximum. In this case, or example, we see that the SNR maximum is 10 dB. Next thing that will happen is the calculation of n step. N step is a value that is coming from SNR max and SNR margin. We'll not deep dive into that. But in our case, SNR max will dwell into n step of 10, which is actually calculated using SNR max minus SNR margin. SNR margin for case of data rate 0 is, and so on and so forth. And that's how we are having a calculation of n step, but I'm just skipping it deliberately. Once the n step is calculated, it sees that whether the n step is 0 or greater than 0 or it's less than 0. It checks whether the n step is greater than 0 or not. If n step is greater than 0, which is actually in our case because 10 is greater than 0, then the algo checks that whether the end device is using a high data rate, low data rate, or its data rate can be changed. Because what n step is greater than 0 is signifying is that the end device SNRs are pretty good. 10 dB, 12 dB, this is fairly good. The RF is good. That means you're very near to the gateway, or your link budget is not that high. If you're using a low data rate, you're just unnecessarily using low data rate and interfering the network. You're just making collisions high using low data rate. So essentially, if you're near to the gateway, your n step will be high, and the ADR will check if your data rate can be incremented. If it can be incremented, because I assume that in this case, the data rate 0, so data rate 0 is essentially lesser than the data rate 5. What that means is that it will increase the data rate. So in essence, the network server records all the SNRs of the packet coming from a specific end device. It will record the SNRs and see, okay, this end device is having a very good RF. It can communicate with a high data rate signal also, and it allocates it as a higher data rate one by one by one. So that's how it happens in case of ADR LoRaWAN mechanism. And this mechanism, a variety of different variants. You will see different variants in Semtech. You will see different variants in other network operators. But with years of research, we have discovered that this is how, if ADR works, it will mitigate the collision at its best, and that too in a very staggered form. So the key takeaway from this slide is to understand that your network server will do an autonomous resource allocation. It will check your RF is good or bad, and depending upon that, it will take a very intelligent decision, and that intelligent decision will be given to you, and you will only start transmitting at high data rates if your RF is good. If your RF is bad, network server will indicate that, okay, you're at a very far distance, don't use high data rates, keep using the low data rates, and we will transmit at low data rates from there. So that's how the ADR algorithm works, and we understood it from the scratch. So a quick summary before we go to the case study, which is the most interesting of all. We understood all the factors from channel, from offset randomization, from data rates and things of that nature. And we have understood that these are the factors that are used to mitigate collision. And in a massive LoRaWAN network, the ADR mechanism comes to the rescue, and it further mitigates the collision. And the data rate distribution in a LoRaWAN network should ideally look like, with near end devices using high data rates and far end devices using low data rates. So that's how the distribution should look like. And we understood it from various examples as well. Concluding this section of ADR, and then we move to the case study. So this is the most important of all and the most interesting one. We'll quickly walk through it, running out of time here. But this is essentially related to the ADR mechanism itself. So we recently done our deployment, and that deployment was actually looking like this. We had a couple of gateways in a society region, and there were different buildings, and buildings had different end devices with them. And all of these were having gas meters. These gas meters were capturing information and transmitting it to the gateways. So if you look at it, it's 5-layer, and all the 5 factors are listed as follows. The frequency was Indian frequency. It cannot be anything else. The bandwidth of all the end devices transmission was 125 kilohertz. The data rate was not fixed, because now we understand the concepts of ADR, right? The data rate on the end devices were not fixed. The ADR was kept on. That means the end devices were dynamically changing their data rates, right? The code rate was fixed to 4, and transmission power on the end devices were 20 dBm. So all the devices in different buildings were using these 5 factors. And if I give you the RF factors description, then there was no enclosure at all. The end devices were having gas meter. Gas meters were typically in the balcony or regions where you see an open air, right? So enclosure was nothing as serious in case of water meters where you see cemented enclosure. The transmission height, wherever the end device was residing, if it's the first floor, second floor, third floor, depending upon the floor of the end device, the transmission height was varying. The receiver height, of course, we always keep it more than 30 meters. We try to find the highest building. We try to find the highest tower and try to put end devices at the maximum, the gateway at the max to max height. The environment was mediumly urban because, there was not many buildings, but then there were tall buildings, and that's how the environment was. So physical factors are listed, the RF factors are listed. And this is how you can get the feel of the entire network deployment. There were buildings like this tall, 15, 20 stories building, and they were essentially, societies, right? And these societies were having gas meters. And on each of these different floors, they're having gas meters, as you can see in the right bottom. These kind of gas meters were deployed. And we are having our gateways either on top of the buildings or some towers or wherever the suitable position are. That's a very unique way of how we do the planning. And all the end devices from different buildings were actually transmitting their information to the gateway to LoRaWAN network server. Now, whatever that we have learned so far, if we quickly go through that from this case study perspective, then we'll see that the channel randomization was very well taken care of in this case study. In this particular network deployment, which is about 10,000 gas meters in a specific region, the channel randomization was very well taken care of. All the end devices were using either of these 8 channels, and the distribution, I mean, end devices were very randomly transmitting information on different channels. So as you can see on the figure, that's a figure from an actual deployment. On the base station, as you can see on the x-axis, there are different channels. On the y-axis on the left, you have different dates. And you can see this shades of brown are depicting how many packets were transmitted on a specific channel. So all the 8 channels, as you can see, were evenly distributed. It was not the case that devices were transmitting only on the first channel or devices were transmitting only on the nth channel. They were using randomly all the different devices, channel frequency. Why is that important? We understood it, right? Because it mitigates collision. So the reception distribution of all the 8 channels was quite even on all our base stations. And if you look at it from a figure perspective, that will start to make more sense. If you look at this figure, you'll see that all the different 8 channels are listed. At the average RSSI from different devices, I have taken a sample of 75 odd devices from that large chunk. Average RSSI, average SNR, and the total uplinks are listed over here. So as you can see, different channels, as you can see, all the channels more or less have around 250 uplinks a day that were transmitted. So that's how beautifully the end devices were using the randomized channel effect. They were not using a particular fixed channel, rather transmitting on different frequency channels. That's why there was not much collision in the network. So second thing was the offset randomization. We saw that, if all devices wake up at the same time, transmit at the same instance, this is not a good way to do it. The devices were actually, in this case study, were transmitting at 5 packets a day. And if I do a close zoom at one of the devices transactions, this is how a typical end network server looks like. The devices were sending uplinks, let's say 5 or 10 times a day. And this was how good the RF was. The RSSI was close to minus 90 dBn on every transaction. The SNR was very good though. And at the same time, as you can see, this channel, all the channels from 0 to 8, 0 to 7, all the channels were being used by the end device. It's not that the end device were transmitting on just one fixed channel. It was using multiple channels at different times, which was leading to a random channel selection. So if we look at the offset randomization over here, we saw that all the end devices were waking up at similar time, that is at around 12 p.m. If you see this last figure, right? All the end devices were waking at around 12 p.m., but not all of them were started transmitting at 12 p.m., right? There was offset. Different end devices were transmitting at different instances within their periodicity limit. If had it been the case when all the end devices were transmitting at 12 p.m., that will be just a disaster, right? So you have to keep that random offset just so that you can get the network run seamlessly. So the application usage, so this is a kind of information that you can gather from the network server directly. There are very advanced features that Sendra Network Server provides for you to evaluate how good your network is running. Application statistics usage is one of them. So you can see within this interval of 4 hours, devices were using random offset to transmit the information to avoid all of them transmitting at the same time. So we are seeing that the random offset in this case was around 1 to 5 minutes. So in this particular case study, we have looked at channel and T0. Both of them are really nicely taken care of. But what about data rates? So it was tested, it was seen that the data rate distribution was very beautifully done in this particular. So if I look at this particular device transactions on the network server, I can see all the transactions. So this is transaction from a single device. All the transactions from an end device were using data rate 5. All the end devices were actually more or less on the data rate 5, and all the uplinks were coming on the data rate 5, which is a good news. Why? Because we now know that it mitigates the collision. And that's the reason nearly all of our end devices were using data rate 5, The packet success rate in our network from this randomly chosen 75 devices shows that most of the end devices were using data rate 5, thereby leading to 100% packet success rate for 50 devices within this 75 chunk. So you see, all the end devices, nearly all the end devices, 50 end devices from 75 end devices were having 100% packet success rate. And a total of 66 end devices were having more than 80%, which is typically what we want to see, right? The application doesn't require you to always have a 100% packet success rate, right? If it's more than 80%, it's more or less good. So above 60%, there is no single device within this randomly selected 75 end devices that was having 0% packet success rate. It was always above 50%, and most of them were lying around 80, 90, 100%. And that was happening essentially because all the end devices so far that we have collected from this chunk, a large portion of them were using data rate 5. And why that was happening? Because the ADR mechanism was doing all of its hard work in the backend. So a summary of the case study, we have seen that channel distribution is very well taken care of. Offset randomization is very well taken care of. Data rate is also being taken care of. As we have seen, all the end devices were using data rate 5, more or less most of them, and the packet success rate was then high. So one thing I wanted to add here is that there are problems that go from here, channel or time offset or data rate. They solve our problems up to some extent, but there are some other problems that exist as well. And that's where the importance of professional deployment comes in. And we discuss about the key factors that are involved in a very professional deployment in LoRaWAN 201. So it was not that all the end devices were talking to this one gateway, rather there were some Pico gateways or there were some small gateways in between. And within this society, we had deployed around, maybe multiple such gateways. I cannot give you the exact count, but that is essentially what is making this network to run seamlessly with so many devices using 100% packet success rate. All the devices using data rate 5 and that too with 100% packet success rate or more than 80%. So that's the reason that this entirety works seamlessly and how we provide carrier grade network and high reliability and QoS in the network. So we understand all of these. We have foreseen these problems. Essentially, the LoRaWAN developers have seen all of these problems when they were developing the protocol. What would happen if we have, let's say, 100 devices in network? What will happen if we have 1,000? We have 5,000 end devices in network. How the network will behave? All of that is very well simulated, very well thought in the development of the LoRaWAN stack. And that's why there are so many mechanisms within the LoRaWAN that if you start leveraging, you can reach unlimited potential of LoRaWAN. Seeing 1,000, 10,000 end devices on a single gateway. How LoRaWAN is becoming the de facto standard of IoT is because of its advanced feature. And we have just figured out so far just two main features, the join and then the ADR mechanism. So with that, I summarize the discussion for today. We understood the join mechanisms. We understood a lot of different theories. We went to the depths of it, which is a little boring, I understand. But sometimes it's important to know about your stack just so that you can leverage it at its maximum. And then we understood the ADR mechanism. We saw how theory of collision works, how different data packet looks like, join request, accept join data packet, and MAC command. How offset randomization, data rate distribution affect the packet success rate in the network. So all of this combined, then we saw a case study within which we saw how these factors essentially affect how seamlessly a network works. So with that, I thank you all so much for your time. It has been a pleasure being the host today and talk about a lot of things that were very technical, I understand, but the more we learn about our technology, it's better that we are able to leverage it. That was the sole aim, and we are going to keep coming up with more dense material, more technical material in the upcoming webinars. So I have some time reserved. I'll quickly take a look at the questions, but note if any of the questions remain unanswered, so it's the right time you ask all the questions that you want to related to this webinar or related to previous webinar if you want to. And if you're not able to answer all of them, we'll come back to you within 2 to 3 weeks period of time. And if you want to discuss something in detail, then of course you can email us at info@senraco.com or visit our websites. Thank you all so much. I'll now take a look at your Q&A. Okay, so Okay, so there was this question from Zoya. Do you provide only the gas meters? The answer is no. We are providing network to a number of different verticals, from gas meters, that is utility market. We have given a case study on water meters in the previous webinar. The smart parking, just recently we have deployed smart poles. Wildlife, agriculture, industrial IoT, you name it. You just want to check our website. There are n number of verticals that we have the pleasure to witness in India, and we are providing the solutions. And also we have gone global, and globally also there are many verticals that we are supporting. Another question is, do you provide complete end-to-end smart gas metering solution? We partner with our vendors. We are the network providers, and we provide the end-to-end gas meter solution that way. We can discuss more on this because it's more of a business question in detail, and our sales team will reach out to you. And I wish you also reach out to us, because I see that your name is not listed over here. Ria, just take a note, please. Do you provide only LoRaWAN solution? Yes, we are LoRaWAN network operators. We have our presence in about 75 cities or more than that in India. So we are a LoRaWAN network operator. So we provide LoRaWAN solutions. Yes. A very good question. How would you avoid congestion due to two separate LoRaWAN networks in the same location? That's a very good question. We have seen a lot about collision within the same network, right? Intra-level collision in this particular. I would love to do a case study on inter-level type of collision also. But we typically rely on duty cycles in this case. So if you look at how LoRaWAN network works globally, you'll realize that there is a duty cycle limitation associated with the end devices. It's not that all the end devices are transmitting very frequently. They maintain a duty cycle limitation, thereby providing other networks to work in the similar geography. We have, so more on this, I would love to, document this question's answer in detail and write back to you, because we do a lot of simulations before we go to a particular location and deploy a network. We see what other kind of networks are available. We have a word and a lot of things that happen behind the scene to mitigate this, but I would love to answer that question in detail, of course. Yeah, this is a very good question again. Is it possible to be collision free in a network? Would any redundancy help? Definitely. If you're relying on just one gateway and tens of thousand end device, if I say that with all these that we have learned, we can mitigate collisions completely, there will be zero collision in the network, then I'm just bluffing. Honestly, I'm just bluffing. It's not how it works. There will be collision, and to mitigate this collision, we do our planning such that a particular end device at least see 2 to 3 gateways as its gateway diversity. So gateway diversity is how many gateways does an end device is able to talk to. So we keep that redundancy in mind while we are deploying our network, and that definitely helps, because if there is a collision on another gateway, your end device's packet will go to the network server with from another gateway. So that kind of redundancy is kept in mind while we are doing the discussion, but I kept the discussion simple, signifying that there was just one gateway in the region. Yes, so we have, is DevNonce a random number or incremental one? So we saw DevNonce, right? We saw that DevNonce is present in the, in the join request packet. That is also what is sent. It used to be a random number previously when there was initial LoRaWAN version 1.0.0. But in the recent LoRaWAN version, 1.1, I believe, the DevNonce has become an incremental number. So every time the join request is sent, the DevNonce is incremented by 1, and so on and so forth. So it used to be a random number in previous versions of LoRaWAN, but now with new devices coming into the market with the new LoRaWAN stack with them, the DevNonce is actually incremental. Another question, a good question. Does ADR also changes the channel frequencies? Yes. ADR is also responsible for changing which frequency channels the device should use. In India, we have currently 8 channels within the ISM band between 865 to 867 megahertz. But we are pushing the regulatory, because it has been recommended from different regulatory bodies like TEC, TRAI also recommended that the Indian spectrum should be increased. And sooner or later, we'll see the Indian spectrum being expanded. So you'll see 16 or 32 channels in that case, let's say 2 years down the line. So in that case, the ADR will also take care of the fact that if the end device is using some channels that are being already overly populated, then ADR also instructs the end device to not use those channels, rather use some channels that are free. So yes, ADR supports it, but its use will be appreciated when the channel number increases from 8 to 16 and so on and so forth. So I can think of answering one question because we have limitations on the time right now. In absence of GPRS, only LoRaWAN is the solution. I mean, GPRS, I think if GPRS is not present, that means there's no coverage for the cellular or cellular kind of IoT, then I don't think there's any better technology that exists as of today that can provide the solution. But I would love to hear the details of this question. If you can write to me right now, I could contact you later. Our team will contact you and understand what kind of requirements do you have in your case, and that we will basically give you the answer. Definitely, LoRaWAN has become the de facto standard for a variety of different verticals. So LoRaWAN could be a possible solution, definitely. We'd love to hear more about the requirements and the use case, and we'll give a better answer. Just one other questions. There are ample number of questions here. So I would not go into all of them right now. So we are about to touch 5:30 today. So we'll definitely be reaching out to you over the email. And I've shown you the email on the screen, as you can see. Please reach out to us if you want to discuss anything. All of your questions will also be answered. There's one other question I see on NB-IoT. I would love to give that answer in detail. Let's have a word, Guy Yom, on email. Thank you. So let's then close this. We'll have discussions over the email. I request you to please visit our website and see what kind of different solutions Sendra provides, how we are excelling in vertical across, India in different geographies, and would love to hear more questions there. Thank you all so much. Let's close the webinar today. Let's meet next time. Thank you so much for joining.